Welcome back, everybody. Gaming Grandpa here, continuing my tutorial for the MLS in Football Manager 23. This is part 5, acquiring players. Before we get into anything else, I just want to let you know this is going to be a 3-episode part for the acquiring players. The first part, which I consider the most important thing in managing an MLS team in Football Manager, and we're going to get into it, is the allocation money. Allocation money, by the MLS's definition, is money that's available to a club in addition to its salary budget. You can't spend it on anything other than MLS activities. It's not like you can take your team out and buy a dinner after a good game. You know, it's not a tangible, well, that's not a good word. It's like fake money. It's like monopoly money. You know, you can only use it for MLS activities involving salaries and players and things like that, okay? Just so you understand. There's 2 types of allocation money. Targeted allocation money, or TAM, as I mentioned in previous episodes. Targeted allocation money is getting reduced every year because the MLS doesn't want to use it any longer, and they're trying to find a way to basically weed it out and make it disappear. I don't know if the other allocation is going to go up because of this. I don't know. But in the meantime, you can tell that it is going down. So every year in Football Manager that you play after this year, it's going to be going down. Now, TAM is different than GAM, and I'm going to get into some of the things that you can use it for, and then I'm going to have a really good definition at the end of this allocation part. Now, the main use is to convert a designated player to a non-designated player contract. So basically, it takes a current DP and makes them a senior contract. Now, that's only available if there's room to do that. What I mean is, the max amount you can pay a senior contract is $1 million over the max budget charge. Okay, if you remember from previous episodes, that would be $1,652,000. All right. So if somebody is on a DP contract making $2 million a year, this is not going to work. All right. It has to be a DP that makes less than that. Another thing, in order to do this, you have to have a DP that you're going to sign immediately. And if you do, you're going to get this image that pops up that I provided from my St. Louis save. I wanted to sign Felix Pazlak. He was a wonder kid, 7-8 years ago. He was supposed to be the super stud. He's still a good player. He's a decent player. He's actually the best left back on my team. That's why I wanted to sign him. But I didn't have an opening because I already had 3 DPs. And he wants a DP contract because of what he's going to be making. So the cool thing is, this message popped up. And it said, hey, you know, in order to do this, you're going to have to convert Edward Lowen to a senior contract because he does not make above the $1.65 million, if that makes sense. Okay. Now, once again, he's the only DP I have that this would work for. So in this case, in essence, you're going to be able to have 4 DPs. So I hit yes, let's use TAM for this because I'm not using TAM for anything else. So, you know, boom, it happened. I was allowed to sign Pazlak, and I kept Lowen, but his contract was no longer DP, it was a senior. I hope that makes sense. Some other things that you can use TAM on is to sign a new player whose salary and fees are more than a maximum salary budget charge. I know it's misleading, but if you pay a player $2 million, you can use TAM to reduce that down to the $1.65 million. Okay? You can also re-sign an existing player whose fees are more than what I just talked about. All right? It's very confusing, and I will talk about this in just a second on why you don't really have to worry about it. Now, you can also sign new homegrown players to their first MLS contract. All right? The max amount for that, though, is $200,000. So, in essence, I covered this in the previous episode. Homegrown players are only signed to a supplemental contract for their first MLS contract. Okay? It's either reserve or a senior minimum salary. If you remember, a senior minimum salary is currently at like $84,000. You can go $125,000 max above that. So in this case, it would be over that $200,000 mark. So you'd still have some of it coming out of your GAM or your budget. All right. So just keep that in mind. Now, it is not tradable. TAM is not tradable, and I'm going to get into something that's going to even confuse you even more. In Football Manager, TAM is not a selected option. What I mean is, unlike GAM, that you can scroll around and play with, TAM you can't do anything with other than watch these messages pop up that says we used it for this and that, okay? I recommend keeping a notebook handy. You don't have to worry about it as an expansion club, and here's why. Remember I said that even though I was in the league for a whole year, there was a lot of things in the league that I couldn't really do or participate in. I didn't have my salary cap. I didn't have, trade access. I mean, I could accept trades, but I couldn't offer anything in trades and different things like that until January 1st of 23. So because of that, any player that I signed, while I didn't have my cap, they had to buy down with TAM, which is all the players listed at the bottom. All right, and they also used my GAM to buy down my senior contracts that were above the salary budget charge, which was $651,000. All right, it's confusing, but just the game keeps track of that for you. Okay, the reason I said keep a notebook handy is because even though you're not an expansion team, at the beginning of the year in January, you're going to get a message like this for any player that meets any of these criteria, and they will use TAM to keep track of that. If you don't have enough TAM or GAM to cover that, then you're in trouble, and that's why I said keep track of the notebook for players that you sign that you think might have TAM applied to it. All right, it's confusing. If you don't really know what I'm talking about, then it's best not to even worry about it and just use the DP trick to go ahead and sign an extra DP, basically. All right, but I wanted to explain that for those of you that are having trouble. You might understand that a little bit more. If not, leave some comments. I will be happy to help you, and hopefully somebody else will understand it too. That way they can, also help. All right, now we're going to get into my favorite, which is GAM. General allocation money is going up. All right, and I will show you different reasons on how you can get more each year. All right. Now, in 2027, it's going to be almost $4 million. Remember, TAM's going down, and everything in MLS is increasing, salaries and whatnot, and costs, so that's why GAM is going up. Now, once TAM completely goes away, GAM might be $5 million by that point. I don't know. There's really no plans for that except to make TAM go away. All right. A club can receive additional GAM in the following cases. If you don't make the playoffs, you'll get some for the next year. If you transfer a player outside of MLS, you are allowed to have, in real life, 1.65, 250, whatever that is. It's $1 million over the max budget charge. You're allowed to transfer that back into this year's GAM. Okay? It's confusing, though, because the Football Manager, it does it automatically for you. You don't have any say-so. So you guys are used to selling players, and it comes back with a message that said, hey, this team got this much because they had an agreement, this team got this much, the board kept this much is going into your budget, okay, your transfer kitty, all right? And in MLS, the league gets a lot too, all right? Then it will say, another message that will say, hey, this much GAM or this much of the transfer funds are going to get transferred to GAM, all right? So that's automatic, you can't control that, but once it hits that 1.65 million, it caps out and you'll no longer get any more money transferred into GAM. All right. If you qualify for CONCACAF, you'll get a bonus GAM for the next year. Designated player charge distribution. Now, in a previous episode, if you remember, I told you every team's allowed 2 designated player slots initially with the option to buy a third for $150,000. Okay, that's the distribution that they're talking about. In the years of an expansion club, when they pay $150,000, that $150,000 gets distributed amongst the other clubs, and then they get. It's not going to be that much with 28 teams, all right? But you will get something in the years that they have a designated, or not a designated player, the years that they have an expansion team that buys that designated player, okay? In an expansion year only, expansion clubs receive a separate amount of GAM. I had almost $3.2 million in GAM because I was an expansion team this year, and you can tell up above it's only 1.9, all right? That's whichever team gets. Now, don't worry if you're not an expansion club, because every other team in the league will get a bonus amount of GAM because they weren't an expansion team. They're trying to keep it fair because of giving all this extra money to the expansion clubs. You're going to get a little bit more too. Also, any club that loses a player in an expansion draft will receive additional GAM. It starts out at 150 and it goes up from there. If you lose a star player, if you lose a designated player or another 22 player, you're going to get more. Okay? Now, GAM can be traded. Unlike TAM, it can be traded, and it's one of the more powerful assets to use in trading, and I'll cover that later. Its primary use, and pretty much its only use, is buying down player salaries. All right? Now, keep in mind that that only works for player salaries that are affected by the cap. That's your senior roster, your first 20 slots. And I covered that too. This next part is even more important because this here is where so many people go wrong when they're trying to register their squad on roster compliance day, and why they have to release some players because they can't pay everybody. All right, so keep this in mind on the guaranteed contracts. There's basically 2 guaranteed contracts clauses, not really clauses, but I don't know how else to say it. All right, if you notice the image here, on senior contracts, you're allowed to throw in this clause. I wouldn't do it. I would never do this. If a player doesn't want to come here because of that, I wouldn't offer it to him. I'm sorry, go find another team. I'm not going to guarantee that because you might end up being a total flop and I want to get rid of you, and with that clause in there, they're guaranteed to get paid when you release them. All right, it doesn't matter their age, it doesn't matter their time in MLS. If you throw that clause in there and it's an accepted clause in the contract and you release them or waive them, they're going to get paid regardless until another team picks them up. Okay, so they'll be at home playing Xbox wondering, what the heck, man? Where's my paycheck? And you'll be like, what the hell? All right. Designated players and under 22 initiative players are always guaranteed. There's no clause added to it. It's just part of the contract. So keep that in mind too. Now, the next part, you'll have to go into your rules of the MLS. Okay. You go into competitions, you click on MLS, and you go to rules, and you'll find this. Now, it changes every year. Next year in 2024, the dates might be 1 March. I don't know. It rotates and changes. So you have to check this because it's very important to understand. All right. March 4th is your initial roster compliance date. Now, you can still add and remove players from your roster. That's not a big deal. You can send them out on loan. You can release them, waive them, whatever you want to do. However, any player that you permanently want to remove from your roster, releasing them or waiving them after this date, if that player turns 24 in this calendar year that you're releasing or waiving them, and they've spent at least 1 season in MLS, they're a guaranteed contract, regardless if it's in their clauses, regardless of the DP or under 22 player. Okay, that's senior contracts only. So if you release a player that's 27 and has played in MLS for 4 years, he's going to be getting paid, and it's going to affect your cap still, unless some other team picks him up. So you got to be very careful about that. All right. The next important date is your roster guarantee date. This year, it's July 1st. Any player you release or waive after this date, regardless of their age and regardless of their time in the MLS, it's a guaranteed contract. Okay? So keep that in mind when releasing and waiving players. The best time to do that is after the MLS Cup and before preseason. You can release and waive all you want to, and you're good to go. All right? Keep that in mind. Even the players that have the guaranteed contract, now they're going to get a compensation, but they're not going to get their whole salary. All right. So that's one of the main reasons why people have trouble registering their squads is because they don't understand the rules affected by the compliance date and the guarantee date. Okay. So please read that carefully before you get to that point of your save. That way you'll understand. All right. Another date that I wanted you to know that doesn't really affect contracts or anything, it's the roster freeze date. Usually it's right before the playoffs, and it's frozen. That means you cannot add or you cannot take away from your roster. If somebody gets injured, you're just out of luck. All right, that's for the playoffs only. It comes available, it unfreezes pretty much after the playoffs are over. Then it unfreezes. Now, for teams that don't make the playoffs, that's an exception. I don't believe you'll get a roster freeze because you're not in the playoffs. All right. But the July 1st date still applies, so keep that in mind. Once again, the best time to release and waive players is in the off-season. All right? So, wanted to just make sure you understood that. All right? And this pretty much just says what I just talked about in the image. I just didn't click over here, but you could, pause it and read it if you'd like. It's a little bit bigger than what this image is here. But once again, you find that in your rules of your competition in the MLS. Okay? Those are 2 things that you need to understand on the allocation money and the guaranteed contracts. All right? So any questions, leave us some comments. I will definitely get back to you. And if you like what I'm doing, leave a thumbs up and subscribe because I still have probably 6 to 7 more episodes of this tutorial. Eventually, I'm going to get to some live action pretty much in a video so that way you can see what the different drafts look like and stuff like this, okay? But in the meantime, stay tuned because I'm having some more here pretty quick. Thanks again, guys, and have a good day.